Hello, welcome to this Literature Revision System Guide to GCSE Poetry. It's the AQA syllabus, it's the Love and Relationships Poetry Cluster, and this is an introductory video where I'm explaining how a workbook I've created will prepare you for success in this exam. So this process has been designed to support independent learning. That's revision, home learning, homeschooling, any kind of catching up of lost learning for whatever reason. And this introduction is in three parts. I'll briefly discuss what the exam requires of you, how the mark scheme gives us some clues as to what we need to do, and then how this revision system, as I've called it, the workbook that I've made, will prepare you successfully. Okay, the exam. This is in paper 2. There are 2 papers in GCSE Literature for AQA. This poetry component's in paper 2 section B. There are 30 marks awarded, which is about roughly 20% of the total GCSE. You should spend 45 minutes on producing 400 to 600 words of essay response. Okay, the challenge is that there's only one question. There are 2 clusters in the anthology, the Poetry Past and Present anthology that you're working through, Love and Relationships or Power and Conflict, but there's only one question on either cluster. And it names any one of the 15 poems, and you compare that one then to one other of your choice. So the pressure is that there is no choice about the printed poem, is there? It seems you would therefore need to know all of the poems. And you may well do, that would be great. If you've got the time, the energy, the enthusiasm, that's brilliant. But it's probably a very time-pressured year for you, particularly if you're in year 11, lots of exams to prepare for. And so this revision system that I've used myself over years of teaching is a really effective way of time management effectively over this year, and making sure that the time you spend preparing for this component of the exam is going to be effective. So the key to it is that as long as you write about the printed poem and you make valid comparisons to one other poem, you don't need to write about both poems equally. And that's been reinforced, that message, by AQA at several meetings I've been to. So that allows us to have a strategy to prioritise and focus our preparation in the lead up to the exams. So which poems should you choose to focus on? Well, each cluster, both for love and relationships and power and conflict, they can be subdivided thematically. The titles are clues. There's either romantic love and family relationships, or there's forms of power, and there's effects of conflict. So to begin with, we're going to focus on one poem for each theme. One romantic love poem, for example, and one family love poem. And we're going to make sure we have embedded the knowledge and skills of a top grade analysis of that poem. And then we're going to learn how to make comparisons to the other poems that link to that thematically. So these are the 2 subdivisions of the Love and Relationships cluster. And as you can see, I've highlighted in red Sonnet 29, I Think of Thee, and Mother Any Distance. And the workbook that you can purchase via the email link below, it takes those poems as home poems, as the key poems for each of those thematic groups, and then links those poems to each of the others. Okay, the mark scheme then. So what do you need to actually write in that 45-minute window of opportunity you've got in the exam to get a top grade? Well, the first thing to remember, which should be reassuring, is that to get top marks, to get a grade 9, for example, to get the top grade rather, you don't need all the marks. 27 marks, 88% will get you a grade 9. 70% of the marks, that's just 21, will get you a grade 7. So that gives you some leverage, and it gives you some encouragement, I think. So the mark scheme itself is divided into 6 levels, and we're looking at the top 2 levels there, level 5 and level 6, and that's where the grades 7 and 8 come from, and grade 9. And the keywords in the descriptors I've set out for you there, we're looking at what does thoughtful examination mean and what does critical exploration mean. So this is a word cloud based on the level 5 descriptors for 7 and 8. You can see the keywords there are methods, examination, and thoughtful. So they want you to examine the methods the writer uses thoughtfully. Okay, so for that, your writing needs to have a thoughtful academic style. And often that comes to the the phrasing and the vocabulary, the precision of the vocabulary that you use. You need to have detailed and developed explanations, and that's how your evidence examination. And a lot of it, as I've said, comes down to vocabulary, but particularly including literary terminology. There's a clause in the mark scheme that states you cannot progress through the levels of the mark scheme unless you hit all 3 of those bullet points as they're expressed in the mark scheme. So you need to remember to use that, and that's what lots of my students and lots of students generally often forget to apply. So for grade 9, to step up from that thoughtful examination of methods, we've now got a critical exploration of methods and analysis. So what does that mean in practice? Well, critical means essentially, critical analysis is even more detailed. And the exploration concept, well, we can meet that by making sure we have a more integrated comparison. Remember, the question for this poetry is compare how poets present. So you're having to link between 2 poems. And if we do that in a more integrated and more thorough and detailed way, we'll be evidencing exploration. So the mark scheme is like a checklist almost, and there are 3 key components there: assessment objective 1, 2 and 3, AO 1, 2 and 3. And the examiner wants you to compare, to interpret, to use quotations, to analyse the methods, use terminology, explain the effects, and then link those ideas to the context and the task. And that means we can have a checklist for our writing that maps to the mark scheme. We'll make comparisons, we will quote, we will analyse methods, we will use terminology, and we will explain the effects and ideas. And that's then how the workbook applies this process to a series of modelled examples and exemplar essays which you work through so that you develop the skills and knowledge yourself to evidence that for the examiner. The workbook includes a sequence of detailed analyses that focuses on specific quotations. And by working through these, you'll have the knowledge that will be relevant for any question. You'll be able to use a range of literary subject terminology, and it will help you develop that tentative, that means a hesitant, thoughtful, exploratory, academic style, and develop a structured, coherent essay argument. You'll be able to work through a step-by-step guide to success. So the modelled analyses follow a petal structure. That's an acronym for making a point, having evidence, using terminology, analysis, and then a link either to another quotation or idea or another text, the other poem. And that petal acronym is used in many schools. You may be familiar with it. These are example pages there of some modelled essays, and you can see they're incrementally more sophisticated and more detailed. They use a consistent framework, and it breaks down the paragraph structure into a series of chunks, into a series of boxes. The process for that is all explained in the ebook, and along with these modelled exemplars for 7, 8 and 9, there are sequential and progressive exercises to help you embed the skills and knowledge you need, starting with grade 7, moving on to grade 8 and then grade 9. As the workbook is available via the link below, there's an email address there. It's just £2 for a 40-page workbook on 6 of the 15 poems. So each lesson and the videos and vocabulary lessons I'm posting here on YouTube will work you through the context of the poems, key vocabulary, close reading and annotation of the poem, and then how to secure grade 7 and progress through to grade 9. Okay, if you found this useful, this introductory explanation, please like it and be sure to check the next lessons. Thanks for watching Literature Revision Systems.